Welcome Brad Boyd to the pub in Mornington. So what do you do down here, Brad?
I'm a real estate agent and I've been in real estate for 10 years, and 5 years ago I started my own company, which is Abode Mount Martha Real Estate. So I run a residential office out of the village in Mount Martha.
So when you were a young fella, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Bundoora, northern suburbs, and obviously grew up through the footballing system, through the Collingwood zone, as they used to call it, and played locally for Bundoora and went to school at Parade College, which was a Christian Brothers school which produced some really good footballers.
So coming through the junior ranks, when did you first get to Collingwood?
From the age of 13, so I went through the Harry Collier squad, and every year there'd be the 14s, 15s, 17s, which led me then to under 19s with Keith Burns as my coach, and spent time through there and then just progressed onto the senior list, and I was on the senior list at Collingwood in the 1990 period.
Yeah, so what's the story there? You didn't quite make it there at Collingwood?
Well, probably at that stage very light, not probably as committed as I should have been, and probably the penny dropped when I was shown the door to go across to Fitzroy. I spent as much time at Collingwood as Fitzroy, and it just wasn't meant to be, and got traded for Tony Woods, I think it was, at the time, and he was a Parade College boy, ironically, and we just did a swap, and the rest is history.
So you've gone from Collingwood to Fitzroy. I imagine there were some fairly major differences between the two clubs. What were those differences?
Very different. Yeah, you really noticed a change in the facilities, lack of finances, a lot of comings and goings with players, instability, whereas Collingwood was definitely a lot more stable. Victoria Park, whereas at Fitzroy, I started at Princess Park, then out to South Melbourne, then out to Western Oval, and then even different grounds to train at times where we could get access. So it was a roaming organisation there for a while.
Still, you had pretty good squads at Fitzroy in those days. Good players. They just seemed to go elsewhere.
Excellent players. Just mentioning in '93 there was a great list that was formed together by Robert Shaw, the coach at the time, and we had Alistair Lynch, Paul Roos, Paul Broderick, Butch Gale, Matty Dundas. The list goes on, and we were starting to formulate a really good pool of talent, and at the end of '93 players started to get poached basically, and just move to more stability and bigger offers.
So was there much discussion then about trying to stick together as a group, or had it got to the stage where you just had to look after yourself and your own affairs?
Yeah, I think it became that way, especially towards the end of '93. '92 and '93 were quite stable, and there was a good senior playing list. But towards the end of '93, I think after Paul Roos went to Sydney and Alistair Lynch went to the Brisbane Bears back then, the rest started to follow, and it started to change dramatically, and then there was some murmurings about finances, and it did take its toll, and I think players eventually started to just look over their shoulder and look at other opportunities.
You were made skipper at a young age. Did that bring a real sense of responsibility regarding the club generally?
Yeah, look, I think so. In reflection, it was a very young appointment, and there was a lot going on in the background that I wasn't really privy to, but I do remember towards the end where the president was gone, the coach walked out, and all hell broke loose, and really I was left holding the can, if you like, just media-wise, and someone to go to, because there was nobody left, which was a very bizarre turn of events to have all different people at the club, and it was folding. It was very hard to keep the team on track and keep things moving. There was a lot of speculation of who was being spoken to and where someone was going to go, and it was all up in the air, and I'm sure other clubs were talking to players at the same time, but the 8 were courted, I suppose, by Brisbane at the time. Just a really weird set of circumstances, I think. I mean, you knew that that's where you were going, but until it all sort of unfolded, it was a pretty numb feeling, because you still had games to play, and you knew that Fitzroy, as it was ending, and then there was the whole supporter side of things with all the emotion and all the winding down and losing a club, and so there was a lot of stuff going on at that time.
So you get to Brisbane, you're one of the 8 to come from Fitzroy, a group merging with another group. How were you received up there?
Interestingly, I suppose, they'd just made their first final and were on a roll, and all of a sudden 8 players turn up and there's reshuffling, and it wasn't, I think if you put any groups together, it wasn't an ideal setting, and hence I think the ladder reflected that in the coming season, and then it regenerated. But very awkward. I mean, you go from being a captain of a club to no role, which is odd from my perspective. That says probably quite a bit. And then I ended up being vice captain when Lee Matthews came back into the club. So yeah, it was a very different circumstance to go to a new club and try and all fit in, and positions and players, and how does the hierarchy fit. But I suppose it just went through a process where there were some turbulent times getting that continuity, and then it was fruitful in the end.
So as a young guy, you've got an injured body. What impact did that have on you?
Pretty greatly, I suppose. For me, it was more not being able to do what I knew I could do, and I was probably always just fighting injuries. It was never really form-based or trying to get a game. It was always just really trying to get my body right, and it just seemed to deteriorate. I had a couple of groin operations as soon as I got up to the club, multiple hamstring strains, and then I had major back surgery, which made it very difficult to get back to full fitness, which I managed to do, but then got injured again towards the end of my career.
So Brad, how did you feel? Lee Matthews is announced as coach of Brisbane, given what had happened 10 years before at Collingwood.
Initially pretty excited. I mean, he's one of the greatest coaches to have coached and players to have played, so I was quite looking forward to it, and we met when he took over and it was really positive. But once again, as a coach, the club comes first and the playing group, and my body just wasn't able to cut the mustard. So as a coach or an employer, you've got to make those calls that you probably don't want to make. So
when it came time and your body was in real strife, were you involved in making that call that it was the end of your career in '99? I just had like a sort of an injury after a game and just couldn't get back, and they were trying all different types of things, flying me over, interstate for needle injections and just trying to get back on the ground. It was just obvious that back in rehab and just floating around again, and as a vice captain, it wasn't a great look, and I knew that the writing was on the wall that I don't think I can get back to a level. And Lee took me for a walk and asked if I'd thought about coaching, and then I probably knew that my time was up, but I think it was mutually agreed that it's not a good thing for the player or the club just to be wandering around injured all the time, and so it was just time to finish up, which is what I did. So you're then sitting back watching this trajectory of this group, the Brisbane Football Club. Were you surprised by their success? No, not surprised. No, not at all. I remember my last game that I played, my replacement was Simon Black, and he'd just turned up to the club the pre-season, 2 pre-seasons before, and blew up the beep test, and one of the most amazing athletes, still young, but I played on him in a practice match the year before I finished, and I just knew that he was something absolutely special, which was proven to be right. And I knew a lot of those young kids like Luke Power, they were babies and they were in the Lion Cubs, so that was kind of nice. I remember Jonathan Brown coming up on school holidays as a 16-year-old and doing running, because I was in rehab obviously, doing running sessions with him, and so I got to see that breed come through. And then obviously, the Scott brothers, Lynchy, Vossi, all those guys, wasn't surprised. I was happy for them. I mean, Chrissy Johnson as well, who was at Fitzroy as a 17-year-old, I captained him for a few years, and he had his ups and downs at the start, but turned into one of the best footballers to have played really over that period of time. So, of course, you wish that you were part of it, but the reality is that you're just not. So, but it did take a bit of
you know, oh, what if? But, you know, I should be thankful that I got the opportunity to play and did what I did and just move on.
So that group of players, post-career, quite a few of them have gone into coaching. Did that surprise you at all?
The Scott brothers doesn't surprise me at all too, as they were ahead of their time as people and like players, good players, but you could see that there was that sort of coaching part of it for me. And then obviously you've got Vossi, who I thought did quite well and was probably unlucky to be moved on. And then you've got obviously Justin Lepage, Paul Roos, who I played with at Fitzroy, who I thought would always coach, and Ross Lyon, who we roomed together at my place in Northcote when I was still playing and then went up to Brisbane. So yeah, so there's a lot in that sort of pool, which is quite fascinating if you dissect it, to all be coaching at that level.
So when you think about the game, Brad, what did you love about actually playing the game of football?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I think I liked the competition, the contest. Like, that probably doesn't frustrate me now, but I miss that contested ball and, you know, taking a nice mark and those parts of the game. Like you see that game on the weekend, Geelong and Hawthorn, and you look out the car, because I was coming back from Lorne, and it's a beautiful day, there's no wind, you know, it's just one of those perfect days for football, and you just think, oh, it'd be nice to get out there today. But yeah, look, you just always have those fond memories of those games that, you know, either you had a really good game or a big win. Yeah, they always stay with you.
Brad Boyd, thanks for joining us at Mornington.
My pleasure, thank you.